September 16, 1933, Frederick Barber Campbell walks into Chase National Bank in Manhattan. He's here to withdraw his gold, 27 bars, 160 kilograms, worth about $200,000. The teller looks at him, says the words that will echo for 90 years. "We can't give it to you. Presidential orders. The gold belongs to the government now." 10 days later, a federal grand jury indicts Campbell. The charge, hoarding gold. The penalty, 20 years in prison. By the end of this, you'll understand how Franklin Roosevelt made gold ownership a federal crime, seized an entire nation's savings at one price, then changed the price and kept the difference, a 69% profit, on property. April 1933. The United States is drowning. The Great Depression has contracted the money supply by 30% in 4 years. Banks are collapsing in waves. Michigan just declared a statewide bank holiday. People are lining up to pull their deposits. But here's the problem. Every dollar in circulation is backed by gold. The Federal Reserve is required by law to maintain a 40% gold reserve against its liabilities. This is the trap. Roosevelt needs to print money to save the banks and fund the New Deal. But the gold standard is a straitjacket. Every dollar printed requires gold backing, and the gold is leaving. Private investors are converting dollars to gold at record rates. Foreign governments are doing the same. They see what's coming. The Fed's gold reserves are hemorrhaging. Roosevelt has a choice: defend the gold standard and let the economy collapse, or break the gold standard and seize control of the money supply. On March 6th, Roosevelt declares a national bank holiday, suspends gold shipments. 1 month later, April 5, 1933, he signs Executive Order 6102. The order invokes the Trading with the Enemy Act, a World War I statute designed for wartime emergencies. Roosevelt declares that the continued private hoarding of gold and silver by subjects of the United States poses a grave threat to the peace, equal justice, and well-being of the United States. Read that again. Subjects, not citizens. Subjects. The order is simple. All gold coin, bullion, and certificates must be surrendered to the Federal Reserve by May 1st. Exceptions: jewelry worth less than $100. Coins with numismatic value, industrial use. Everything else is illegal to own. The penalty for non-compliance: $10,000 fine. 10 years in prison, the same penalty as kidnapping. The government offers compensation, $20.67 per troy ounce, the official price under the Gold Standard Act of 1900. You hand over your gold. They hand you paper currency. That's the deal. But here's what they don't tell you. January 30th, 1934, 9 months after the seizure, Congress passes the Gold Reserve Act. Roosevelt immediately exercises his new authority. He raises the official gold price from $20.67 to $35 per ounce, a 69% increase. Let's do the math. You surrendered your gold in May 1933 at $20.67 per ounce. The government forced you to. Criminal penalties if you refused. 9 months later, that same gold is officially worth $35 per ounce, 69% more than what you were paid. The Treasury does not recalculate payments. They do not cut you a check for the difference. They keep it. The accounting gain to the U.S. Treasury, $2.8 billion. In 1933 money, equivalent to roughly $60 to $75 billion today. A windfall created by changing the price after they took your property. This is the soft default. The government didn't steal your gold right. They borrowed it, gave you paper currency at one price, then changed the rules, and you can't buy gold anymore to benefit from the appreciation. It's illegal now. You're locked out. Frederick Campbell's 27 bars. Valued at the old price, $200,000. Valued at the new price, $340,000. His loss, $140,000. 41% of the revalued wealth. gone. But Campbell doesn't go quietly. September 26, 1933. He files suit in federal court against Chase National Bank, argues the president's order is unconstitutional, violates the Fifth Amendment, due process, property rights. The court listens, actually accepts his argument about the violation. September 27th. The very next day, a federal grand jury indicts Campbell for failing to register his gold by the September 18th deadline. Later, they indict him again for the actual hoarding. 2 counts, 20 years, $10,000 in fines. The message is clear: challenge the order, we'll destroy you. But there's a problem. The president signed the order, but the Banking Act of 1933 requires the Treasury Secretary to authorize seizure of gold, not the president. The order was signed by the wrong person. When this legal vulnerability becomes apparent, Roosevelt issues 2 follow-up orders, Executive Orders 6260 and 6261, October 1933, properly delegate seizure authority to the Treasury Secretary. Then Congress formalizes everything, passes the Gold Reserve Act in January 1934, permanent legislative authority, new civil penalties, automatic confiscation of all gold found, plus fines equal to double the value of the gold seized. Campbell's case gets dismissed by the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, not on the merits, on jurisdictional grounds. The court says his right to his gold is a matter of state property law, not federal law. Federal courts lack jurisdiction, a procedural defeat. The constitutional question is never resolved. Campbell's criminal prosecution technically fails because of the authorization defect. But the court still upholds the government's authority to seize his gold. His 27 bars are confiscated anyway. The government seized his property, faced a judge who questioned its authority, then simply passed a new law to legitimize what it had done. Campbell was the only person prosecuted under the original order. But the terror worked. Most Americans complied, turned in their gold, wedding rings, coins, family heirlooms. The alternative was federal prison, except not everyone complied. Milton Friedman later calculated that approximately $287 million in gold was never surrendered. Loss, destruction, exportation, and hoarding that went undetected. People who looked at the government's offer did the math and decided to take their chances. Why the revaluation? The Gold Reserve Act deliberately reduced the gold value of the dollar to 59% of what the Gold Standard Act of 1900 had fixed. This devalued the dollar relative to gold. In theory, it should increase the money supply and stimulate inflation. Domestically, Americans wouldn't notice. They couldn't own gold or convert dollars to it anymore. Internationally, the move incentivized gold miners to increase production, foreign governments to export gold to the United States, accumulating gold reserves that justified expanding the money supply. This is the birth of fiat currency, money backed not by gold, not by silver, but by government decree, and the threat of law enforcement. When the Supreme Court reviewed the gold valuation in 1935, Roosevelt sent a message. He privately told his advisors that if the court invalidated the gold program, he would not comply. He planned to announce in a fireside chat that the court's decision was unconstitutional, that he would ignore it. Invoking necessity as his defense, the Supreme Court got the message. In the Gold Clause cases, February 1935, the court held the government's power to abrogate gold clauses in private contracts and treasury bonds. 4 justices dissented, but the majority prevailed. The court's reasoning was circular. Contracts promising payment in gold had been voided. But since gold was no longer available for private purchase, by order of the government, the obligation to pay in gold had become impossible to fulfill. Therefore, debtors only needed to pay the stated number of dollars instead. The government made gold legal, then claimed gold obligations were impossible to perform. Therefore, bonds didn't need to pay what they promised. No private party was allowed to sue for damages from the revaluation. The gold loss belonged to the public. The government's windfall belonged to the Treasury. Executive Order 612 established four precedents that persist today. 1. Emergency powers trump property rights. Once the president declares a national emergency, constitutional protections can be suspended. The Trading with the Enemy Act became a template for dozens of subsequent executive orders. Bypassing Congress. Normal institutional rights. 2. The death of the gold standard. By breaking the link between currency and gold, Roosevelt accomplished what Bretton Woods would formalize in 1944, the replacement of hard money with fiat currency, money backed only by government decree. 3. Revaluation as monetary policy. The 69% gold revaluation showed the government could engineer sudden wealth transfers through accounting adjustments. This technique reappeared decades later in proposals to address federal debt by revaluing Treasury gold holdings at market prices. An idea worth hundreds of billions to today's government, without any vote by Congress. 4. The CBDC precedent. The order criminalized ownership of a particular form of money, gold, replaced it with government-controlled currency. Modern discussions of central bank digital currencies reference historical precedent, evidence that the state has the power to eliminate competing forms of money, enforce a monopoly on currency. The full story is more complex than the narrative suggests. Citizens were technically compensated when they surrendered gold. The government didn't seize the metal without paying anything. It paid the fixed price, $20.67. The fraud wasn't seizure without compensation. It was the deliberate decision to compensate at one price, then change the legal price before citizens could benefit from appreciation. The gold standard was genuinely constraining recovery. Modern economic historians largely the gold standard deepened the Great Depression by preventing monetary expansion. Countries that abandoned it earlier, Britain in September 1931, recovered faster than those that clung to it. The U.S. abandonment in 1923 did eventually help. Low compliance suggests widespread rational behavior. The 287 million in unreturned gold likely represents people who kept their gold hidden. They knew the government was paying below market rates. Whether they violated the law is a separate question from whether the law was just. Campbell was the exception, not the rule. The government indicted one attorney, faced legal challenges, quietly fixed its legal authority through new orders and congressional action. Most Americans never faced prosecution. Enforcement was sporadic, reactive, not systematic. But here's what matters. The machinery worked. The government could invoke emergency powers, control the legal system, control the legislative response, prevent the Supreme Court from stopping it through political pressure, enforce it through criminal penalties, prison, fines. The architecture of confiscation was complete. Compel citizens to exchange gold at one price. Wait 9 months. Declare the new official price. 69% difference for the government. Prevent citizens from owning gold to benefit from future appreciation. Prosecute those who resist. Pass laws to legitimize seizure if co-object. Economically, the revaluation was justified as necessary to break the gold standard's constraints, expand the money supply. But the method, seizure followed by unilateral price adjustment, established a template for government expropriation, a template that reappeared throughout the 20th century and remains relevant in discussions of modern monetary control. Campbell's taught the government a lesson, not about constitutional limits, about legal procedure. If you're going to seize property, make sure you have the right authorization first. Be prepared to pass new laws afterward to fix any technical effects. The property gets taken either way. 1974, 41 years after Ex Order 6102, President Gerald Ford signs a bill repealing the ban on private gold ownership. Americans can legally own gold again. By then, the price is $150 per ounce, 7 times what Roosevelt paid in 1933. The appreciation belongs to those who hid their gold, or bought after the ban was lifted. Everyone who complied in 1933 got paper currency, paper that inflated away. Today, central banks hold 35,000 tons of gold. The U.S. Treasury holds 8,000. Valued on their books at $42 per ounce, the statutory price set in 1973, market price today over $2,000. The same accounting trick, the same windfall waiting to be claimed. Some economists propose revaluing Treasury gold holdings at market prices. Instant hundreds of billions to address federal debt. No congressional vote required. Just change the number. Keep the difference. Sound familiar? FDR's gold seizure wasn't a clean theft, but it wasn't honest policy either. It was a soft default, a deliberate sequence of decisions. Compel exchange. Change the price, keep the profit. Criminalize resistance. The machinery of confiscation, built in 1933, still standing today. Next week, 1971, Nixon closes the gold window. The final severance, the dollar becomes pure fiat. And the world's reserve currency becomes backed by nothing but trust. And aircraft carriers, that's next.